Hello everyone. First of all, thanks for being here today. It's really important to have this big community in all of the events. So my name is Miguel Balparda and I work for Nexus. For the last 5 years, I worked in more than 25 countries and roughly 100 cities for some of the biggest Magento projects. Since joining Nexus last year, I've helped maintain Superteam, one of the most used extensions to integrate Varnish and Magento 1. Early this year, I was nominated as a Magento Master in the Mage category for my contributions and for actively engaging with the community. I'm also a Magento Certified Solution Specialist and a sysadmin in my free time. I'm also a Barbecue Certified Solution Specialist, so if you ever come to my country, that's what you're having. Last year, I had the chance to present during several events like Mint Magento Brazil, Mint Magento Vietnam, and Mint Magento Argentina. And this year, I'll be doing here, Romania, Poland, the Netherlands, and Indonesia. So chances are if you go to any other event, I'll be there and we can have a beer. Most of you already know Nexus, and if you don't, then you are missing out a big thing. So today I'm here to try to demonstrate the scalability of Magento 2 and how to boost your type performance with some simple changes. I really think more sales doesn't need to mean more resources. So what I did was a simple benchmarking. Most of the system level configurations can be found now on Nexus GitHub. So if you want to check that out, there's also the software we use and the MySQL configurations, Apache, how we configure Magento and everything. Now, first, I tested a Magento 2 using PHP 5.6 versus the same using PHP 5.6 and Varnish. Then I did the same with PHP 7, and finally, I compared PHP 5.6 and PHP 7. I will explain you why I did that in a couple of slides, so bear with me. Now, here, this is the hardware we use. As you can see, this is not something I built for this test, but something you can actually go and buy right now. I wanted to do this because this is the plan people use the most for Magento 1 and 2, so this is actually what we do. As you can see, we use a 2X Core i5 at 1.9 gigahertz, with 60 gigabytes of space in RAID 10, Redis, memcache, Varnish, and 25 gigabytes of RAM. This is a shared server, so keep that in mind. This is the bare metal, but underneath the hood, we did several customizations to improve the server performance. To increase the read and write performance, we mounted frequently accessed file systems such as home, var, and temp with a no-time attribute. We also have gzip output compression enabled by default and keep alive enabled. From a database perspective, we use Percona servers on all our Magento plans. So if you want to go and check the Percona configuration variables, that's on GitHub too. We also use PHP FPM, an alternative high-performance method to run PHP-based applications. There are a couple of variables we disable, so trust me when I say this is completely optimized for Magento in every possible way. Now, this is the software we use. Some of these versions are now outdated, because I did this test 2 months ago probably. So I will try to reproduce this test again with the newer software, like the new PHP versions and the new Magento 2.1 at some point. Now, since every Magento store is different, this is what we use for this particular case. It's important to say this because this is, from a merchant perspective, a medium store, and that is what we wanted to test, actually. Now, for these tests, I use memcache, Varnish, and Redis. I want to try to guide you on how to configure this so you can have that in your own setup, which is quite simple. So if you are not using this, then you should probably will be doing that. Now, Varnish is super simple to configure. It's under Stores, Configuration, and if you go to System, you'll find this screen. Then you only need to set up the TTL, which is the time to live for public content, the access list, which is the IP access list, the backend host, the backend port, and then you'll have to export this and start Varnish again, which is usually Varnish D -B or -L or -F. I don't remember the exact command, but then it's quite simple. So it's not like you have to use super time for this and do that like for every server or every store you have. Then we also configure Redis. We use Redis for page cache and full page cache, and this is how you configure. As you can see, it's quite simple. You only need to specify the server and the port, and then the extension you're using for this setup. This is for the page cache, and this is how you configure this for the full page cache. Note the difference. If you are using both, you will need to specify the database for the full page cache one. As you can see, database is one in here. Then we also use memcache for sessions. There's a slight difference in here, and that will depend on the PHP memcache extension you'll be using, which is memcache or memcached. That's not quite different, as you can see, so that's pretty simple too. And then we enable production mode by running this Magento deploy mode set production. This is really important because most of the stores we see, they are actually in default mode. And, well, developer mode wouldn't be suitable for this test because unlikely production mode should be set for this test because unlikely developer mode, it compiles code and also it deploys the static code in the pub static directory. Because, you know, that's how you need to access your files and not reload them every time you access your store. One second. Now, to keep the setup relatively simple, I install Varnish, Redis, and memcache. In the same physical server, I install Apache. This can add, if you do this and you install all the software in different servers, you can have a really complex setup to maintain, and that is why I decided to do this in this way. I know you can have some performance gains if you do that, but then for the easiness of this time, this is what I did. Now, benchmarking data without context has little value in my opinion, and that's why I want you to understand what are we testing and how are we testing it. To do the actual testing, we use Siege. While we know Siege is not an absolute performance benchmarking tool, I think it remains useful to see how a change impacted in your performance. That means if you change your PHP version or you use a different Varnish version or you don't use it at all, Siege will be able to tell you how that impacted in your side. Siege is an open source HTTP-based benchmarking utility that can stress test a web address or a list of web addresses with different levels of concurrency. So that is exactly what we did for this test. As you can see in this script I created, first with the help of Ashfish Router, we created a sitemap, then we ran the cache with 50 concurrent users for 60 seconds with the sitemap we just created. We wait 1 minute for the first test to chill the server out a little bit, and then we start tests. We use this script to run 5 tests at 1 minute intervals. We did 50, 100, and 300 concurrent users for a minute. Now, before showing you the actual results and how this impacted in the performance, I want you to look at the Siege output. This is how it looks like. There are a couple of variables we'll be using, which are response time, transactions, and transaction rate. I will explain you why are we using that in a second. Now, to start, this is the graph I will be showing you. This is the PHP 5.6 transaction rate. 1 second, I have this result over here. Now, for PHP 5.6, we had 48 transactions for 50 users, 69 transactions for 100 users, and 76 transactions for 300 users. Then, this is the transaction rate. These are the transactions and the response time in seconds. As you can see, the performance deteriorated with 300 users, and that is why I wanted to use this variable, because the first two graphs, they look pretty much the same, but then if you see this, we see a spike of almost 4 seconds on a page load, which is pretty bad, you know. Then I did the same with PHP 5.6 and Varnish. As you can see, the charts remain pretty much the same, and then this is how it compares with PHP 5.6 without Varnish. Now, with 300 concurrent users, the transaction time was about 8 times higher with Varnish, from 67 to almost 600. With 100 concurrent users, the transactions rate was almost 2.5 times higher with Varnish, and with 50 concurrent users, the transaction rate almost doubled. The results pretty much speak by themselves, showing us how Varnish drastically increased the server performance. Now to the total transactions. With 300 concurrent users, the transactions handled were almost 9 times with Varnish. With 100 concurrent users, 5 times. And with 50 concurrent users, the transactions doubled. With Varnish, this server was able to handle 9 times the transactions versus a server running PHP 7 without it, handling 300 concurrent users without any performance decrease. I will show you that in a second. You see that red line over there? That's the Varnish response times. That's almost 1/10 of a second. Now, we all know Varnish is responding to most of the requests, and it's piping any of those requests to Apache directly. So that is why once the cache is warm, we see this kind of behavior. With 300 concurrent users, the transaction rate was 370 times faster with Varnish. That's a pretty huge improvement, you know. I will try to explain this number in detail in a second, so bear with me. With 100 concurrent users, the response time was 90 times faster. And with 50 concurrent times, the response time is 50 times faster. Now, it's important to understand we are not going to be seeing 377 times faster response times or load page times, but then this is pretty obvious, you know. You should be using Varnish anytime you need, anytime you can. Now, let's go to PHP 7. Sorry. With 50 concurrent users, with 300 concurrent users, sorry about that. I'm kind of lost. So, yeah, this is how it compares PHP 7 and PHP 7 with Varnish. With 300 concurrent users, the transaction rate was almost 5 times higher. With 100 concurrent users, the transaction rate was almost 2 times higher. And then with 50 concurrent users, the transaction rate was almost 2 times higher too. Now to the total transactions. With 300 concurrent users, the transactions handled were 5 times higher. With 100 concurrent users, the transactions handled were 1.5 times higher. And with 50 concurrent users, the transactions handled were pretty much the same. And then again, the response time. With 300 concurrent users, the response time was 187 times faster with Varnish. With 100 concurrent users, the response time is 31 times faster. And with 50 concurrent users, 50 times faster. Now I know this is a lot of numbers, and I will try to wrap this up in a second. The remaining chart will show you how PHP 7 compared with PHP 5.6. Now this is important because most of the time where we are using SSL or any certificates, like in a checkout page or in a customer account, all the records are piped through Varnish. And that means Apache is handling all the high load. Now, here. With 300 concurrent users, the transaction rate almost doubled with PHP 7. With 100 concurrent users, the transaction rate nearly doubled, and with 50 concurrent users, the transactions were almost the same. With 300 concurrent users, the total transactions handled were almost 2 times, with 100, 3 times, and then with 50 concurrent users, pretty much the same. And this is pretty important, the response time between PHP 5.6 and PHP 7. With 300 concurrent users, the response time was 2 times faster. With 100 concurrent users, 2 times faster, and with 50 concurrent users, pretty much the same. Now, I know these results are not as good as PHP 7 with Varnish, but then keep in mind, all the transactions are handled through PHP and not through Varnish, so that is why I really want all of you to be using PHP 7 now. Now, this is pretty much it. The conclusion is pretty simple to understand. Anytime you can, you should be using PHP 7 and Varnish. And then we are still waiting for a patch for Magento 1, but our Inco friends, they have a really good patch on GitHub you can be using right now, and then Magento 2 has support for PHP 7 and Varnish out of the box. So if you have any questions, this is pretty much it. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you find me somewhere, let's have a beer, man.